Donald Trump won the election by an extremely large margin. The Republicans won the Senate, looks like the House. And all in all, it was a complete and utter lose for the Democratic Party. Now, I knew Donald Trump would win for a while. I made a video about it that you should check out, but then you'd ask, did I only make this video to gloat? No. Not entirely anyway. I haven't a clue as to what my demographic is. I am just starting out, but thank you for 100 subscribers. I am unbelievably grateful for your accommodation. That aside, I would like to turn my attention to anyone that is confused as to the turn of events, that being an utter lose for the Democrats. Trump didn't just win because of his party and mentality, he won because of the Democrats and Kamala Harris. I'm not here to harp on you by listing bar for bar how the Democratic Party utterly failed to be a realistic opposition when their main selling point was that they were not Donald Trump. No, this, ladies and gentlemen, I propose, is the fault of the regular Democratic-leaning citizens. And I will elaborate further on this. A lot of Democrats are utterly pretentious. I get that you care a lot about your values, people will suffer under Trump. But surely, how many sermons were you expecting to convert people who don't care about what you're preaching? 1 million in it? I consider myself slightly left-leaning with regard to many issues, but I was getting quite sick of your continued insistence that the world is going to spontaneously combust the moment Donald Trump goes into office. Kamala Harris was riding off of that, flip-flopping like Monkey D. Luffy's slippers when he was running to save Ace. It was utterly ridiculous. Nobody would objectively stand behind her in other election conditions. Of course, if people don't share the idea that Donald Trump is the Antichrist, people wouldn't want her versus him, with definite goals and clear standing with his voter base. The fact is, the political polarization that you had forced in, with gender wars, identity politics, and your common behavior of calling out injustices then excusing the exercise of that exact unfairness when your side does it. I am not saying the right is innocent of that, but you preach louder than them. You scream and cry in public, with the more reasonable voices quite in the background. Your utter freedom to call people past German soldiers, people whom have families, that have people that they agree with, those actions, and that liberty you feel has consequences. You failed to hold your own people accountable. And you lost. Tirade aside, this is my lead up to a very important philosophical idea. I coin it, not to claim it is a revolutionary idea, but for the sake of simplicity, the loser's mentality. You lost. Your team lost terribly. How should you feel? What should you do? Should you switch sides? When you lose, it calls for an evaluation of circumstances and self. Many people want to push forward, ignoring the major and destructive loss that they face. It makes me want to grab their face and push it into the mud. The soil drenched in their tears. You lost, and that means something. You lost for reasons. Don't listen to the people that indiscriminately call for you to move on, because the fact is there are people to blame, things you could have changed and things you ought to change. The name of the game is self-reflection and accountability. You failed. In a lot of aspects. And you were selfish. The US elections don't only affect American citizens, it's a global issue. The US has hands everywhere, and yet everyone's major concerns are for themselves. That is understandable. Of course, you would worry about yourself, but so do your opponents. That is a contributing factor as to why you lost. You're selfish. They have more people who are selfish about what they view as right than you do. Now, let's not pretend this is just about you and your side. The far left and the far right have been acting in similar ways lately. Both extremes are willing to sacrifice larger issues or even basic principles in pursuit of their ideological goals. The far left, for example, has been willing to support foreign efforts, like those in Gaza and Lebanon, continuing to funnel US taxpayer dollars into causes that end up unaliving civilians. Meanwhile, the far right often rallies around an America First mentality, focusing on national self-interest and protectionism. At least in that case, they have a clear, self-preserving agenda that speaks to many Americans. You fail to distinguish yourself meaningfully. The far left is often so committed to their own ideological purity that they forget to prioritize the needs of their own country. Likewise, the far right, while focused on national identity and security, also exhibits authoritarian tendencies that undermine democratic values. This is where the extremes start to blur. They may have different objectives, but their methods can seem strikingly similar: authoritarian tactics, intolerance for dissent, and a refusal to engage meaningfully with the needs of others. The point is that both extremes, the far left and the far right, are trapped in their own bubbles of self-interest. They're both pushing the same divisive, militant, and exclusionary rhetoric. They're both focused on their own sense of right, without fully understanding the complexities of the world and the people in it. You, too, have fallen into that trap. It's a pattern. The far left's push for international causes and collective action sometimes alienates the very people they claim to fight for, while the far right's isolationist stance alienates the world. And so, while you fail to connect with a broader base of voters, the ones who lean toward a more nationalistic or self-interested agenda were the ones who won, because they made clear that they prioritize America over everything else. At the very least, the Republicans have a U.S. citizen-first approach. That's won over you. You're so caught up in your idealism and your distant causes that you can't even recognize where your own priorities should lie. If you're not prioritizing the real, immediate concerns of your own people, who are not only the people you agree with, you'll lose every time.